Hey foodies, I'm DustFood, and today I want to talk about Year 8 and what might be just around the bend for us as players of Dead by Daylight. So, we are just about done with Year 7. We have the mid-chapter update coming out soon, and that will be a wrap on this current year. Once that's done, it will be time to turn our attention to Year 8 and the anniversary chapter, which is going to kick everything off. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at some DLC I would like to see, some balance changes, some general changes to the game that would make me look back at this one and say, yep, this was a good year. So first and foremost, when I think about DLC, one thing that would undoubtedly make this a really strong year would be the return of Stranger Things. Now, this one is not entirely in Behavior's control, but it would be absolutely massive for the brand if they could do this, especially with the final season of Stranger Things right around the corner. It doesn't need to be a new chapter with a new killer, probably Vecna or whatever. It doesn't need to be any of that. What I would say is just by bringing back Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Demogorgon, and maybe some new skins for all of them, maybe some legendary skins like Hopper and Joyce, I think that would be plenty, and it would really engender just a ton of goodwill from the community. As far as actual new DLC, I think that one of these, particularly the anniversary chapter, it really needs to be a needle mover of a license. This cannot be something of niche or middling popularity where people just look at it and they say, yeah, that's fine. That's all right. I mean, okay. It would be a massive slip up if they were to choose something like, off the top of my head, something like Hatchet or something like that. If that ends up being one of the licensed chapters, I just think that's a massive missed opportunity. At a time where the community is really hurting for something to all rally around and get excited, I think that what we need to see here would be something like Alien, Friday the 13th, Child's Play, FNAF, something along those lines. Something that gets everybody to say, oh snap, look what they just added. And really, I mean, look, I'm going to say it, some people might disagree with this, but if it is at all possible to get Friday the 13th, now would be the absolute best time in the history of the game that they could do that, because that would be something that really snaps the game back to a very positive direction. As for non-licensed DLC, I think one thing that they might want to look into doing is something that fans have obviously wanted for a long time, and that would be something in the form of just a genuine monster. So obviously Dredge and Demogorgon are genuine monsters, but they need some backup here. They need something else that we can point at and say, now that is not just a killer with a knife. That is a monster. And the cool thing is, I think the community is pretty accepting about it. It could come in the form of like a cryptid type monster, or it could be like Dredge and be something more abstract. It doesn't really matter. I mean, look, for me, I'd love that Cthulhu chapter. I've always been, I'm going on like 2 years of talking about this now, but I don't think that'll happen, but I'd love to see it. So basically, we need something truly monstrous from one of our DLCs. Again, let's just kind of talk about that a little bit. Actually, one more thing before I talk about that. So, players want certain gimmicks more than others, right? When you ask around, you hear, for a long time we heard about wanting a cowboy and a knight, right? So I think people lose their minds for a vampire, a pirate, a werewolf, something along those lines. And a werewolf, obviously I chose that for the thumbnail because, I mean, what could be cooler than getting a werewolf? That would just be fantastic. And really, I think their approach to DLC for this upcoming year should just be what I have always mentioned. It's the rule of cool. Something that anybody that plays the game, in fact, I'm not gonna say anybody, because you can never appeal to 100%. So let's say something that 75% plus of the player base looks at and says, you know what, that's really cool. Because what we need right now is not more tricksters, twins, skull merchants. What we need is something more along the lines of Oni and Deathslinger, things that are just cool. So while I get that there is a place and a time, the Trickster was released to appeal to a very specific market. The Twins was just this really cool idea they came up with. I don't think it quite worked out, but it was a really inspired idea that they went with. So there is a time and place for that. I love creativity. I understand appealing to certain markets. However, I think for this year, we need something where we can look back on this year and just say, man, all the killers that came out this year were just really badass, right? I think that'd be a really good thing for Year 8. As far as balance changes go, I'm going to start with something kind of vague and then move a little more specific. But the first thing I would say is just keep things fresh. Don't let a meta get stale. If you start looking at you being the devs, being, Behavior Interactive, if you start looking at the numbers and you realize, wow, this perk is being brought in 80% of games, 75% of games, maybe it's time to lower that perk down a little bit, or find a perk that does something kind of similar and buff it up some so there's actually a decision to be made. Because I think that's when the game hurts the most, is when you start kind of guessing. You load in as a survivor and you kind of know at least 3 of the killer's perks before they do anything, or you're a killer and you just kind of know. For years and years how we've always known there's going to be Dead Hard. So they recently changed Dead Hard. I hope that change goes live because now it's not as much of a given. I like that. I like having to do some of the guesswork with the game. So I just think it's big to make sure the meta doesn't get too stale. That being said, I do think it's important that this would be kind of number 2 here. I think they need to have an itchy trigger finger when it comes to the kill switch. As soon as they hear a report, like what's been going on with Merciless Storm recently, or like 2 other times, because apparently that perk is just permanently broken. Every time they change anything, that perk gets just ruined. But they need to be quick to kill switch certain killers and perks, because you can't have it. You can't have it like this, where people are ruining the game by using perks that maybe they know they're broken and maybe they don't. That's irrelevant. Yeah, it's poor sportsmanship if you know that a perk is broken and you're still using it, but they shouldn't even have the option. As soon as you hear about it, you should confirm it and get rid of it until it's fixed. I think that's been a real issue, is that Dead by Daylight is sometimes taking days to get these things out of the game, and that's just, to me, that's unacceptable. Another thing here, and this is something that I think the devs need to listen to in real time as well as for year 8, and that's utilize PTB feedback. Because sometimes it feels like you do, and sometimes it feels like you don't. And I realize, look, this is a very whiny player base. They whine about all kinds of things. And I say we whine. Like, yeah, I'll put myself in there too, but listen to the player base. If they say that something's just not working out, it's not working out, okay? You have got to level with us here. Like these recent healing changes, I would listen to the player base on this one, but I think that, again, kind of vague, but just be open to the fact that maybe the changes made weren't so good. Talking a little bit about maps, I would like to see reworks for the Red Forest again, because yeah, I'm gonna need you to redo that one, but better this time. I think Red Forest right now has been made just completely insufferable. There is no map in the entire game that I dread more than the Red Forest. I don't mind it as a survivor. I think it's very survivor-sided right now, and I'm playing a lot of survivor these days, but man, if I load into that as a killer, I just know it's gonna be a miserable time. That said, Temple of Purgation, they did a good job reworking that one. Garden of Joy, I think of Star Wars, you know, like, we were this close to greatness, because they were. It's a cool looking map. They could have done a lot better. I mean, they couldn't have done much better. They just need to fix up a few issues of it. Like, so many of these, I just shrink some of these maps. Some of these maps are way too huge. Just shrink them by 15%. And I think all of a sudden you're going to solve a lot of the issues for a lot of these maps. And then lastly, Springwood / Batum Elementary. Just Control-Alt-Delete these maps. I hate these maps. I'm not actually recommending that one. You know, I'm not asking you to give us less content, but man, if I had my way, those maps would be gone. And then a generalized thing, just kind of for all maps, is I really would love to see infinite loops addressed. I just think that some of these loops are absolute BS, and you should never feel like, well, I have to bring Bamboozle, or I just have to give up the chase, or I guess you should have played a stronger killer. That's no fun. You know, granted, I play Clown. He can kind of shut down infinite loops a little bit better than most killers. It's one of his few strengths, actually, but you know, you shouldn't ever feel like, well, I guess I just played the wrong character. That's a bad feeling. So yeah, infinite loops, they feel like a relic of the past that just won't really go away, but they should. Finally, I want to talk about some buffs and some nerfs, and I think I'm going to surprise some people with the nerfs, but as far as the buffs are concerned, just Hillbilly. Hillbilly needs a buff, Sadako needs a buff. Really, for Sadako, the main thing is just like get rid of that visual terror radius that's in the PTB right now, and then, you know, maybe a little quality of life thing here and there. As for Hillbilly, dude, just revert him back. Get rid of the overheat mechanic, and, you know, look, I'm not saying you have to bring back Insta-Saw Billy if you don't want to. I didn't have a problem with it, but if you know, if that's something you're not willing to do, fine. But just try to bring Billy back to his relatively high power level that he once had. As far as the nerfs are concerned, look, every single year, every single day is the perfect day to nerf the nurse. She is just obscenely broken. She's gross. She doesn't even feel good to play because she's just too strong. Honestly, if you want to make year 8 a year to remember, bring the nurse down to everyone else's level. Ironically, I'm also going to say on the opposite end of the spectrum, a minor nerf to Clown. All I'm going to say with that is the pinky finger does not need to work like it currently works. I think it's just a gross add-on. It's too easy to hit those bottles. It doesn't offer enough counterplay. It's a little too strong for my taste. And then finally, I want to kind of finish this up with some add-on passes. The first one being Blight in my script here, which was a very loose script. I just put a couple of exclamation points by Blight's name because, yeah, it needs to go. Not it being the Blight character, but his add-ons are just obscenely gross right now. The Alchemist Ring, if nothing else, if you touch nothing else, the Alchemist Ring has got to be reworked. It is taking a character that would already be S tier and making them just really gross. But then on the opposite end of that, I would love to see Oni, Nemesis, and Pyramid Head get reworks to their add-ons just to make them all more interesting, because right now they're all really boring, mostly weak. And then in the case of Pyramid Head, you can't even tell them apart. So many of them look so similar. But those are just some of my ideas for year 8. I would love to hear what you think would make it the perfect year down in the comments below. As always, I do thank you for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are. Until the next video, I've been Das Food. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my